Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! So today we're going to talk about all of the theories surrounding the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Dun dun dun! Well, amateur sleuths around the world have been hypothesizing on how this could have happened, how this young man with little or no training could have gotten past the greatest security force to ever protect individuals in our nation, the Secret Service of the United States. And there are many, many theories bandied about. And I want to make a statement right up front. First of all, Coffee Talk is for things that I find interesting but don't necessarily believe. And also to the overlords and the censors out there who are watching this, understand that until the FBI finishes and publishes their explanation of what exactly happened and solve the case, as it were, then until that happens, all theories are on the table. We have an absolute right to engage in conjecture and to be amateur sleuths and Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys. We can do that, especially right now since we've not been told exactly what happened and what occurred. And the investigation is ongoing, so we can just have this discussion. Before we get started, I would like to point out that 99% of you who watch my videos never make a single contribution to this channel financially. That 1% of the viewers of my channel support me on a regular basis. And that's barely enough for me to have a below poverty existence. I don't work outside of this channel. So if you got anything from this, if you've enjoyed this channel down through the years, if you're a long-time viewer, or you just popped on this video and liked it, please consider making a donation to this channel through the links below in the description, because I receive no money from YouTube. I don't monetize my channels because I hate to be interrupted in the middle of something with a commercial, especially with products I don't appreciate. So there you go. All right, so let's start with the official narrative that a young man who didn't appear to have any political aspirations whatsoever, no political connections or opinions, this is the mainstream media's take on this, acted alone because he popped a gasket and he had a mental breakdown, and he managed to slip past the incompetent Secret Service and local police that were there on the premises as well, to climb up on top of a building 150 yards from Donald Trump's platform. And after being witnessed by numerous people in broad daylight, he did his preparation in broad daylight, walked around with a rangefinder, and even though he was on the radar, nobody did anything. And even though there was a Secret Service person behind Donald Trump's stage, ushering people away from the stage, nobody contacted Donald Trump at the platform and told him that he had a security threat. Even though information that has been released suggests that they had 90 minutes of warning ahead of time that this individual was up to no good. And even after he climbed on top of the building and people yelled and screamed, many minutes passed, and no one ever decided to maybe whisper in the president's ear that they had a threat on hand. So that's the mainstream media. Once again, lone gunman acting alone, and that's their story, and they're sticking to it. So what are some other theories that are bandied about? Well, right now on the internet, it's very popular to suggest that there was more than one shooter. Now, I've looked at the information, and I find some of it interesting and some of it absolutely non-credible. I've ruled out that anyone fired from the window of the building below, and there's a couple reasons for that. The vantage point from that position would not necessarily give you a easy shot above the crowd. He needed the elevation of the rooftop to pull off the shot. And so I don't believe that there was a shooter inside the building. Now, the water tower. I've seen video footage that suggests there was an individual on the water tower. Now, from what I can tell, even through enhanced video techniques, you cannot make out whether the person has a rifle or not, and you never see the shadow on top of the water tower in any kind of shooting position. It appears to be standing erect on the top of the water tower, and there's no way to make a 350-yard shot on a head-sized target from freestanding on top of a structure that may or may not be moving in the wind. It may or may not be a flat surface to stand on up there or lay down on. So I've not seen any proof that shots came from the water tower. And not only that, Alex Jones and some others have suggested that was the angle of fire, and I find that to also be ridiculous. The angle of fire to the shot that hit Donald Trump in the ear clearly came from the area where the shooter was located on top of that building. Now, having said that, I've heard detailed, intricate, and I've seen these videos where they use audio spectral analysis to compare the first 3 shots to 5 more shots that follow in a volley after a short pause. So you've got 3 shots, a short pause, and then 5 rapid fire shots that have to come from a semi-auto. The first 3 rounds potentially could have been something else, but those 5 follow-up rounds number 4 through 8, absolutely were fired rapid fire from a semi-auto as quickly as you could pull the trigger. The 8th shot, the final shot in that 5-shot volley, is there's a slight hesitation between the first 4 of that and the final 5th, or the number 8 shot fired, the 5th of that volley. And so it was enough space there that 8th shot could be isolated and analyzed. And as an audio professional and a shooter and a person with, my ears aren't what they used to be, but my ability to listen, my ability to understand what I'm hearing is higher than 99% of the population. And that's because I've been fine-tuning it as a musician for years and analyzing sound and using spectral analysis like they use to analyze this shot count. That I use that to analyze snare drum sounds in the studio, and have a very epic history of working in that environment. So I understand audio spectral analysis. I understand those waveforms, the color graphs. And on top of that, I'm a lifelong shooter, and I come from a Marine Corps family, and my dad was a Marine Corps rifle instructor in Camp Pendleton in San Diego, the Marine base there. And he also served overseas as well, training troops from around the world. So I can tell the difference. And not only that, I'm an IDPA shooter and a 3-gun match shooter, and I spent about 15 years of my life on the range and shooting 3 or 4 times a week, hundreds of rounds per match or per training session. And so I know the distinct sound of an AR-15. In the first 3 shots of the audio spectral analysis, you can absolutely identify those first 3 rounds coming from an AR-15. In fact, the cell phone camera, they used 3 or 4 different cameras and analyzed the sound from the 3 or 4 different locations. In the first location, located near the tree right below the drip line of the building that the shooter was on, the video from there, you can literally hear the semi-automatic AR-15 cycle. You can hear the bolt cycle. So there's the sound of the bullet, of the round exploding, but also the mechanical sound of the cycling of the rifle. And if you've ever spent time at the range, especially with the hearing protection in, you can easily define the sound of the action and hear it. It's not just the explosion, it's the sound the gun makes. That's one of the reasons you can tell the difference between an AR and an AK-47. An AK-47 has a looser action and a very definable action sound as the bolt cycles that goes along with it. That makes it sound like clack, 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 clack. Clack, 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 clack is an AK-47. There's a crack to a 223. It's a glorified hot 22. And anybody who's been around 22s, they crack, they don't boom. Right, so you have the cracking sound of the 223 5.56 ammunition coming from an AR-15 in the first 3 rounds, along with the bolt sound of a tight AR-15 action operating from that first location. Then the next 5 rounds sound very, very different. For one thing, they're farther away. When you are at a distance, you can't hear the bolt cycling as part of the sound. It doesn't appear in the audio spectral analysis. So the other shots were coming from another location, not the location of the first 3 rounds. Secondly, there's a signature sound of a 30 cal. This would be a 308 rifle. This could be a 7.62 by 3.9, except a 7.62 by 3.9, which is the AK round. It has that rhythmic and distinctive signature. So the 5-round volley that comes after the first 3 AR shots that definitely came from the shooter on the roof. I'm sure of that. There's those 5 other shots, that quick volley afterwards is a 30 cal. It's not a 223. It's not a glorified 22. It's got a deeper bass resonance. You can see it in the color spectral analysis of the audio file coming from that location, and also the one at the end of the building. It's very, very distinct in that one. You can definitely even almost tell direction, that the first 3 shots come from the roof. They're the signature AR 223 sound, and then you have 5 shots of 30 cal coming from a semi-automatic rifle somewhere else. And it's very clear in the spectral analysis that it has a bass resonance that is not present in the first 3 rounds. And if you want to talk about, well, they were changing camera positions and that's going to change it. Well, I'm an audio expert. I understand the sound differences between straight on and off axis audio signals coming into a microphone. Fine-tuning that technique on a drum kit is something I'm an expert at. So I can tell you there is no directional difference in a microphone that would equate to or explain the bass resonance, the 200 hertz and below depth to the 5-shot volley that comes after the first 3 shots, except for it had to have come from a larger caliber, and I would suggest it was a 30 caliber round. Now, did it come from a handgun? Because a 9mm is a 30 caliber round. That's 0.38 inches. It's a 38 essentially in millimeter, 9mm. Very close. The problem with that is that a lot of the bass percussion of a handgun is lost on the short barrel. That the blast of the round coming from a handgun doesn't have the time to develop that a long rifle has. In a longer barrel, all of the pressure is used and very little of it is lost out the end of the barrel. Now, on a handgun, most of your explosive power goes out the end of the barrel and doesn't get behind the bullet and have time to develop. So it changes the signature characteristic of the sound. A rifle feels more like a punch in the chest with a hammer, right? There's a percussiveness to it because the powder has time to fully develop before it leaves the end of the longer barrel, where a handgun tends to have a more shallow sound. Yes, there are deep notes to it because it's a bigger caliber, but you don't have that punching of a very specific frequency that's missing in the 5-round volley. The 5-round volley, shots 4 through 8, appear to me from my analysis to be coming from a long rifle in a 30 caliber, more than likely a 308 Winchester round, which is a standard military and police round and civilian round as well. And it was from a semi-automatic rifle. There's quite a few options for a 308 in a semi-auto. One of the most obvious ones is the SOCOM from Springfield, which is the M1A1 in a shortened version. And if I had to make a wild guess, I would say that was a 308 rifle and not a rifle that was present and in the hands of the shooter, which does seem to suggest there was a second backup shooter. Now, where he's located, I'm not going to make that speculation. But now we kind of have a grasp for the mainstream media, who doesn't know any of the things I just told you about. They never took the time to learn it. They never employed an expert to analyze it. They just went, oh, there's 8 shots that came from the same rifle, and it did. I do not believe that it did. I believe the audio evidence is clear that there was 2 different caliber weapons used in those 8 shots, the first 3 being of 1 caliber and 1 size, and the remaining 5 in that volley being of a completely different caliber. So you've got kind of 2 competing arguments here. One side says there were two shooters, that the failure of the Secret Service is not explainable by incompetence, but suggests it was an inside job. So there is this rising conspiracy theory amongst people on YouTube and social media, much of it backed by expert analysis, like the analysis I just described about the audio. And but they jumped to a conclusion here that if the Secret Service didn't fail, but was somehow involved in it, someone there was involved in it, and that if there was more than one shooter, then that suggests that the perpetrator behind all of this is the deep state, the dreaded government insiders who are not elected, but rather stay there as part of the bureaucracy as presidents come and go, a shadow government. And this is the belief amongst most people. This is the most common. But I'm going to offer you yet a third theory. A theory I've not heard anybody else talk about. And I want to bring it up. Could this attempted assassination on Donald Trump be the result of a foreign intelligence agency getting involved and creating the situation? Did a foreign government try to stop Donald Trump from ascending to the presidency through assassination? Well, what foreign governments engage in assassination? Well, there's Israel. You got to look at them first. It's kind of what they do. Just recently, a couple of days ago, in an event that shook the Middle East, the head of Hamas was killed while in Tehran. He was blown up in an Iranian safe house just hours after being in a room with all of the senior leaders of the Iranian government and all the proxies. They were all there for the inauguration of the new president, who died who was replacing the previous president of Iran, who died in a very suspicious helicopter crash. So the Mossad, the Israelis, have absolutely mastered the art of assassinating political leaders and have made it okay. Honestly, it's a violation of international law. It's considered a war crime. They get away with it because they label these people as not political leaders, but as terrorists. And you can assassinate a terrorist, but you can't assassinate a political leader. But I suggest Israel's been doing that for a very long time, and they're experts at it. So you got to ask, whenever there's a murder or an attempted murder, you have to ask yourself the classic question that cops all ask in any investigation. Who had the motive? Who had the opportunity? And who had the means? So you have to prove those three legs of the three-legged stool to make your case stand up in court. The perp's got to have a motive. He has to have the opportunity to do it. He can't do it if he's not there. And he has to have the means. He can't do it if he doesn't have a weapon, right? So if you can prove that he had the opportunity, had the motivation, he had the motive to do it, he had the means to do it, and he had the opportunity to do it, then you've got a pretty strong ability to convict in court. So definitely the Mossad absolutely had the means to do it, and they could have easily created the opportunity to do this and made it all happen. But what's their motive? That's where I fell short when I pointed the finger at Israel. Why would they want to kill Donald Trump? The fact of the matter is they wouldn't. That the Israelis aren't too worried about who gets to be president, because they might be actually more worried about Kamala. I mean, if Kamala Harris has come out with anti-Israel and pro-Hamas statements in the past, there's no guarantee from the Israeli perspective that she's going to continue to do what Biden did and support Israel with arms shipment after arms shipment after arms shipment after aid package after aid package. That this is something Biden was committed to, but Kamala may not be committed to. So Trump is much more pro-Israeli friendly. Would Trump hold their feet to the fire? I believe so. I don't believe Trump would be happy with all the civilian casualties that's been happening in Gaza. But for the most part, Donald Trump's going to back the Israelis. So they don't have a motive to get rid of Donald Trump. They might have one to get rid of Harris, but not Mr. Trump. President Trump. And so who's next? Who's out there? The Russians. Well, once again, Donald Trump's going to put an end to the Ukrainian war. He said so openly. He's against these forever wars. He will not commit American troops to defend even a NATO country. I don't think he's going to honor that treaty if he's president and immediately jump in with the full force of the military to protect any country, much less get involved in this meat grinder of a bloodbath in Ukraine, where 3 generations of men have been killed in Ukraine. That there's this huge age gap. All the men are either old or very young. The rest are dead, right? Because they have lost so many thousands and thousands of troops. And Ukraine is only so big. And so I don't see us getting involved in that if Donald Trump's the president. In fact, he would probably end all funding for Ukraine. So Russia has no reason to get rid of Trump, right? They have no reason to try to hit our president. They would be more likely to hit the other side than to hit Trump. But then I just mentioned Ukraine. Ukraine would have a lot of motivation to get rid of Trump. Trump has vowed to end it. Trump has vowed to force them both to the negotiation table. Trump has ceded that Russia will have to have some of that eastern territory of Ukraine that they've captured, or there's not going to be a deal, right? You know, the Russians aren't going to just withdraw and let Ukraine go on. And so, of course, the Ukrainians, they don't want to give up 1 square inch of Ukraine. And they have fought tooth and nail to stop that from happening. And so the Ukrainians, of any other country, that Zelensky in Ukraine would be the one who had the most motivation for destroying Donald Trump and preventing him from ascending to the White House. That in fact, here's the thing about Ukraine, many of you don't know, is that the Ukrainian government has created a hit list. And many of those names on that hit list are Americans, where they are actively soliciting people to commit assassinations of American citizens. Yes, these are the people we're giving money to in Ukraine. Tucker Carlson recently came out and found out that he was on the list. And this is a big list of individuals. I can't help but think at the top of the list, whether spoken or unspoken, that Donald Trump's name wouldn't be there. So is it possible that the Ukrainian government was able to access individuals within the Secret Service to make this attempted assassination happen? Don't. Excuse me. Got the coughs this morning. Well, it is coffee talk, and I got the coughs. Sorry. Bad dad humor. Bad dad humor. Is it possible, then, that a foreign country, any of those we mentioned, Ukraine being at the top of the list, could access the Secret Service and get their help? Well, the argument for people who think the deep state did this would say absolutely. They don't need Ukraine. They did this. They themselves did this. But that would require a really large conspiracy. And I think if the deep state was in on it, the FBI would be in on it. Not just the Secret Service, but the FBI would be in on it. If your theory is correct, it was a deep state attempted hit, then I don't believe the FBI would be investigating the incident the way that they are. Now, I talked about the lone gunman concept. Here's some more evidence that suggests that he had outside help, either from the deep state or a foreign country, or terrorist organization potentially. Is that he had 3 offshore accounts. Now, a 20-year-old does not need 3 offshore accounts. They probably don't have enough money to have 1 bank account. Yes, there's some millionaires out there that are 20. This kid wasn't one of them. Why on earth would he have 3 secured offshore accounts? That's very suspicious. The only reason you do that is if you got paid a large sum of money to do something. So it could be that Crooks was paid either by the deep state or one of these foreign actors. And he had to have those accounts to put the money in 3 different safe places, because you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? Another concept that makes me think this guy had to have had help. But just take the whole second shooter thing and toss it out the window. You don't even have to believe that to believe this guy had help. 3 offshore accounts. He has explosive devices, which were fraudulently said at first to be very crude, rudimentary, but they're not. They were remote detonated explosive devices. And to utilize a remote detonation device, you have to have a certain level of expertise. That using remote detonation for any kind of improvised device is extremely high level. It's at least upper end terrorist ring level, if not government spook level. So some, that's what I'm looking for. Some force, whether military or civilian, who had an expertise in electronics and explosives, and the use of those two things together, had built these devices. There's no reason to believe this young man built them himself. And it suggests that he had help. Okay, so there's another deal. He could have built them himself. He's a smart kid. He did have a math and science award, right? But, that's a very specialized thing they don't teach you in school. How to do that is how to make those devices is something you got to have an electronics background and an explosives background to be able to complete those hybrid devices, which utilize both those expert level techniques of both electronics and explosives. Another thing that makes us think that he had help is that the FBI, and this is another thing that kind of exonerates the deep state in my mind, that the deep state, if it were a across-the-board deep state, JFK level assassination attempt on Trump, then the FBI would not be concerned with talking about or bringing up the fact that the shooter, Mr. Crooks, had encryption on his phone, that he had advanced level encryption to the point where the FBI couldn't crack it. And the FBI had to go to Israel and get an Israeli expert in deciphering these encrypted messages to try to crack the encryption on his phone. Why does a 20-year-old kid have advanced electronically detonatable or detonation explosive devices? Why does he have 3 offshore accounts? And why is his phone so encrypted that the FBI has to get a foreign nation and a company from another country to break the encryption? This is the FBI. If they can't break the encryption, that's a big deal. That's not something that a 20-year-old kid would just download off the interwebs, okay? So there is very strong evidence that this shooter had some kind of expert help in this. Then you add to that that it appears that the Secret Service either dropped the ball or they stepped down. There has to be someone in the Secret Service that's either working with the shooter individually or through some kind of clandestine group, potentially even intel agents from another country like Ukraine or Israel. They had to have some kind of higher up level help. And there had to be somebody in the Secret Service that engineered things, because there's also too many coincidences there. And I point the finger directly at the head of the Secret Service, who was recently after being grilled on Capitol Hill by our Congress and Senate, this individual then resigned as head of the Secret Service, because there's too many failures for them to be just failures. There has to be some kind of Secret Service involvement, right? That was not Donald Trump's usual people that protected him. They were all pulled off of Donald Trump's detail by the head of the Secret Service and sent 60, 70 miles away to where Jill Biden was having some kind of event there. So they pulled all the experienced people off of Donald Trump's detail in Pennsylvania, sent them to another location, and a lot of the individuals there weren't even trained in personal protection, in dignitary protection. They were just Department of Homeland Security officers. So if it looked like there was a lot of incompetence around that situation, that's the main reason why. Because the experts weren't on the spot. The people that normally take care of Trump weren't there. Now, the Secret Service agents on the stage that piled on him, they did their job. No shade being cast on them at all. But somebody at a high level had to intentionally look over that rooftop and say, no, don't worry about the rooftop. Somebody at a high level had to say, let's not shoot that guy on the roof till we figure out who he is. Somebody had to be protecting him. Somebody had to be looking the other way while all these reports were coming into the Secret Service about this shady character, his shady behavior, him having a rangefinder, and then ultimately him being on top of the roof with a rifle, and nothing was done. Now, how do you get the Secret Service to do that unless they choose to do it? Somebody at a high level, like the lady we talked about who had to resign. Somebody at the local scene level had to be involved in it too. How could a foreign entity get someone on our side to do that? They could do it because of their own political beliefs. They could do it because they were setting the Secret Service did it. But I don't necessarily think that's true. One way you can get government agency people to look the other way, to make incompetent acts on purpose. Oops, accidentally on purpose, they left the rooftop open. Oops, accidentally on purpose, they ignored the calls from local police about the man on the roof. Oops, 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 oops. Is if you get one or two, in this case I think it would require 2 Secret Service agents to be compromised. I recently watched a movie where a Russian mobster needed information on a mysterious person, and he ran into a dead end in his own methods, and he got a hacker, and the hacker says, I have somebody at the Pentagon. And they show in this movie this person at the Pentagon at their work computer, and suddenly on their work computer is these X-rated images starring them in all this S&M gear, and the caption says, I need all the information you have on this person, or I'm going to send these pictures to your wife. And the person's like, no, I got to get in there and make this happen. They're going to out me. So all you have to do is blackmail. That a foreign entity could have inspired and radicalized this young man, funded him, trained him, gave him all of the things he needed. And the same foreign government could then have compromised the head of the CIA and the field person at the top who was in control there at the Trump rally. And simple blackmail. Simple blackmail would do it. Just get something on them, and they would help you. Now, I think if it were a deep state ran operation, that the FBI would not be bothering to unencrypt the phone. The FBI wouldn't be investigating the way they are. I think the FBI was caught off guard. I think it's because it's potentially a foreign country tried to kill Donald Trump, and the one who has the most motive is Ukraine. Tell me what you think in the comments section below. Don't forget to support this channel. We'll see you next time on Coffee Talk!